My hands trembled as I adjusted my custom Italian suit, standing at the podium of my foundation's annual charity gala. That's when I saw her, Sarah, sitting at table 19, her eyes widening with recognition. The designer dress she wore couldn't hide the desperation in her posture. 7 years ago, she'd thrown my engagement ring back in my face, telling me I was going nowhere while she walked out with James, that hedge fund manager with the Maserati. Now, here she was, applying for assistance from my foundation while I prepared to announce this year's $50 million donation. Our eyes locked across the ballroom. She quickly looked away, unable to hold my gaze. I felt no satisfaction, just a hollow vindication. The same woman who told me I'd never amount to anything now couldn't look me in the eyes. Karma isn't just real, it's spectacular. But the journey that brought us to this moment? That's a story of heartbreak, betrayal, and the fire that forged me into the man I am today. I wasn't always Matthew Reeves, tech mogul and philanthropist. 6 years ago, I was just Matt, a scraggly-haired coder with bags under my eyes and an overactive imagination. My apartment was a shoebox studio in the rough part of Boston, with water stains on the ceiling and neighbors who preferred to argue at 3 a.m. My desk was a door balanced on 2 filing cabinets, and my chair had more duct tape than original fabric. But what I lacked in material wealth, I made up for in conviction. I'd been coding since I was 12, and I absolutely knew, that my ideas could change the world. I'd graduated with honors in computer science, turned down 3 corporate job offers, and decided to build my own reality. My parents thought I was insane. "A stable job at Google isn't good enough for you?" my father had asked, his disappointment palpable over the phone. But I couldn't explain the fire in my veins, the vision I had for a new kind of predictive AI that could revolutionize healthcare. Every night, I'd fall asleep to the glow of my laptop, dreaming in code. Then came that night at Vox, a dimly lit college bar where my roommate had dragged me to socialize like a normal human being. That's where I saw her, Sarah Mitchell, dancing under the blue lights, her laugh cutting through the bass-heavy music. I wasn't the type to approach women in bars, but something about her pulled me across the room like gravity. When our eyes met, the world around us seemed to blur. "Let me guess," she said, smiling over her cocktail. "You'd rather be anywhere but here." Her perception startled me. We talked until closing time. About books, philosophy, our dreams. Sarah was studying business, came from old Connecticut money, but had this hunger to prove herself beyond her family name. I told her about my startup ideas, and unlike most people, she didn't glaze over. She asked questions, challenged my assumptions. By the time I walked her home, I was already falling. Our relationship bloomed against all odds. Sarah was everything I wasn't: sociable, polished, confident in any room. I was the awkward genius she found endearing. For 3 years, we built what I thought was an unbreakable bond. She'd bring me food during late-night coding sessions, massage my cramped shoulders, and listen as I rambled about algorithm architecture. I'd surprise her with picnics in the park, handwritten letters, and midnight drives when she couldn't sleep. We complemented each other, or so I believed. The struggle was relentless. I worked as a freelance developer by day, pouring every other waking hour into my startup. Some months, I barely made rent. Sarah took a job at a marketing firm after graduation, supporting us while I chased my dreams. "It's temporary," I'd promise, kissing her forehead. "Once we get our first round of funding, everything changes." But as months stretched into years, I watched something shift in Sarah's eyes. The supportive smiles became tight-lipped. The encouraging notes stopped appearing on my desk. She started attending more work events alone, coming home with stories of colleagues' promotions, vacations, new cars. My parents are asking when you'll get a real job, she mentioned one night, her voice casual but her eyes avoiding mine. They think I'm wasting my prime years on a pipe dream. I worked harder, slept less. My pitch meetings with investors ended in polite rejections. Your concept is fascinating, but too theoretical, they'd say. Come back when you have a prototype. Each time, I'd return home defeated, to find Sarah more distant, more adorned with gifts I couldn't identify the origin of. A new watch, designer shoes, a silk scarf that was on sale. The apartment that once felt like our sanctuary began to feel like a boxing ring, with unspoken tensions hanging in the air between us. We should go out more, she suggested, frustration edging her voice after another night of me working past midnight. Live a little, Matt. We're 26, not 60. But I couldn't stop. Not when I was so close to a breakthrough. Not when every line of code might be the one that changed everything. Not when I had promised her the world. I just never imagined she'd go looking for that world elsewhere. The signs were there. I just refused to see them. Sarah's late nights at work events. The mysterious text messages she'd shield from my view. The growing collection of luxury items that appeared in our apartment, like artifacts from another life. I was blind to it all, buried in code and dreams, until that rainy Tuesday in October. I had just secured a meeting with a promising angel investor. My first real shot. Bursting with excitement, I left the coffee shop and decided to surprise Sarah at her office with lunch. But when I arrived, her colleague mentioned she'd called in sick that morning. Worry replaced my excitement as I rushed home, imagining her ill and alone. The apartment was silent when I entered. Relief washed over me, seeing her purse on the counter. She was home. Then I heard it, her laugh, that melodic sound I'd fallen in love with, coming from our bedroom, followed by a deeper, unfamiliar chuckle. My body moved before my mind could process. I flung open the bedroom door to find Sarah wrapped in our sheets, a man's arm around her waist. A platinum Rolex gleamed on his wrist as he sat up, more annoyed than embarrassed. "Matt!" Sarah clutched the sheet to her chest, eyes wide with shock. You're supposed to be at your meeting." The man, James, I would later learn, looked at me with something between pity and contempt. "You must be the boyfriend." His voice was smooth, refined, dripping with the confidence only money can buy. "Sarah's told me all about your projects." Everything blurred. My fist connected with his jaw before I realized what I was doing. The satisfying crack was followed by searing pain in my knuckles. He stumbled back, touching his lip, looking almost amused. "Really, Sarah? This is what you've been settling for?" Sarah jumped between us, pushing against my chest. "Stop it, Matt! Just stop!" Her eyes weren't apologetic. They were angry. At me. "You weren't supposed to find out like this." That's when I saw it, the glittering diamond bracelet on her wrist. I'd noticed it days ago, convinced myself it was costume jewelry when she claimed it was just something I picked up. "How long?" My voice was barely audible. 3 months, she admitted, not meeting my eyes. "James is a client at the firm. A client. With a corner office. With an investment portfolio. With everything I was struggling to become. The confrontation that followed tears through my memory like shattered glass. We stood in our living room, the one I'd furnished from thrift stores and sidewalk finds, as Sarah packed her things. "I've been patient, Matt. For 3 years, she threw clothes into a suitcase. You promised we were building something together, but all you've built is fantasies. So you decide to cheat? To lie?" The betrayal burned in my throat. "Instead of talking to me?" She whirled on me, mascara streaming down her face. "I tried talking. You never listened. It's always one more algorithm, one more investor meeting, I'm tired of living on promises and ramen noodles. I grabbed her arm, desperate. The meeting today, it went well. This could be our break. She yanked away with such force that she stumbled back against the wall. Wake up, Matthew. Your silly startup dreams won't pay the bills. They won't give us a future. Her voice cracked. James can. Those words hit harder than any physical blow. So that's it? 3 years together, and you're measuring our relationship in dollar signs? Her silence was my answer. I deserve financial security, she finally said, voice cold. I deserve someone who puts me first, not his computer. When the door slammed behind her, my world collapsed. I sank to the floor, surrounded by the half-empty closet, the lingering scent of her perfume, and the shattered pieces of what I thought was love. The weeks that followed were my personal hell. I lost the apartment, couldn't afford it alone. Lost weight, couldn't remember to eat. Friends offered couches, sympathy, and alcohol, but nothing filled the void. The investor backed out after I missed our follow-up meeting. I watched from a distance as Sarah moved into James's downtown penthouse, their relationship flaunted across social media. Rock bottom came on a freezing December night when I slept in my car because I'd exhausted all couch surfing options. Staring at my fogged breath in the darkness, I made a decision. I would either die here, a victim of betrayal, or I would rise from these ashes and become unstoppable. I chose fire. Sometimes destruction is the only path to creation. I cleared everything, deleted social media, cut contact with mutual friends, and channeled my heartbreak into unrelenting focus. Pain became my fuel, rejection my motivator. I took a coding job at a startup accelerator. The pay was minimal, but it came with a desk, Wi-Fi, and most importantly, connections. By day, I built other people's dreams. By night, bleeding eyes fixed on my laptop, I refined my own vision. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. 4 hours a night, maximum, often less. My health deteriorated, but my code improved. Every line written was a step further from the man Sarah had deemed worthless. The breakthrough came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, 4 months after Sarah left. I'd been stuck on a complex algorithm problem for weeks. Delirious from exhaustion, I took a different approach, something counterintuitive, nearly reckless in its design. When the test came back successful, I laughed until I cried, alone in the darkened office. My prototype worked. Not perfectly, but enough to prove the concept. I showed it to my boss the next morning, expecting mild interest. Instead, he called an emergency meeting with the accelerator's investors. "This is revolutionary," said Elena Vasquez, a veteran tech investor known for her brutal honesty. "But you look like death. Are you trying to kill yourself over this project?" Her question caught me off guard. I'd become so consumed with proving Sarah wrong that I'd forgotten my original purpose. This technology could predict early-onset diseases before symptoms appear, I explained, my passion returning. It could save lives. Elena nodded slowly. And that's worth more than revenge, isn't it? Her words hit home. That afternoon, she offered $2 million in seed funding, but with conditions. I needed to assemble a team, take care of my health, and focus on the mission, not whatever personal demons were driving me. With funding secured, everything accelerated. I hired brilliant minds who believed in the vision, not just the potential profits. We worked not from desperation, but from purpose. I started sleeping again, eating properly, even joined a gym. My body and mind grew stronger as my company did the same. Our first major contract came from a regional hospital system, then another, then international interest. Each success built upon the last. The technology evolved beyond my initial concept, expanding into areas I'd never imagined. 18 months after Sarah walked out, We closed our Series B funding round at $50 million. 3 years after that brutal night, my company, now employing over 200 people, was acquired for $1.7 billion. The boy who couldn't pay his rent was now on the cover of Forbes, hailed as a healthcare technology pioneer. The money meant nothing compared to the impact. Our technology had diagnosed over 10,000 cases of early-stage diseases, saving countless lives. That was the real victory. Not the penthouse I now owned, not the car collection gathering dust in my garage, not the invitations to elite events that cluttered my inbox. I established the Reeves Foundation with a $200 million endowment, focusing on medical technology for underserved communities. The work became my life, my purpose, my redemption. The pain that Sarah had inflicted transformed into something beautiful and meaningful. I barely thought of her anymore, until that charity gala. The annual gala was my foundation's premier event, $25,000 per ticket, black tie, attended by the elite of Boston society. I never expected to see her there, certainly not seated at table 19, designated for grant applicants rather than donors. "Sir, your speech is in 5 minutes," my assistant reminded me, breaking my stunned stare across the ballroom. I nodded mechanically, adjusting my cufflinks, platinum, engraved with my father's initials. My father, who'd lived just long enough to see me succeed, but not long enough to benefit from the advanced cardiac monitoring system I'd later develop. Sarah hadn't changed much physically, still beautiful in that polished, deliberate way. But something was different. The confidence had diminished, replaced by a careful vulnerability. She sat beside an older woman I recognized as her mother, both dressed well, but not extravagantly. No sign of James. My speech was a blur. Words about innovation, compassion, and second chances flowed automatically while my mind raced with questions. When I finally stepped down from the podium, I knew a confrontation was inevitable. She approached during the dessert course, her steps hesitant. "Matthew," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. "You look incredible." Up close, I could see the fine lines around her eyes, the tension in her smile. "Thank you, Sarah. I'm surprised to see you here." "My mother's medical foundation applied for a grant," she explained, fidgeting with her clutch. "I didn't know it was your foundation until today." An awkward silence stretched between us. 7 years of unspoken words. "James left 2 years ago," she finally said, eyes darting to mine and away again. "For someone younger. The prenup was not in my favor." The confession hung in the air. This was it. My moment for cutting remarks, for cold dismissal, for the satisfaction I'd once desperately craved. Instead, I felt nothing but weariness. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it. "No one deserves betrayal." Her eyes widened at the implied forgiveness. "Matt, I've thought about you so often. About us. About how differently things might have—" "Don't." I raised my hand gently. "The past is written. We can't change it." Tears welled in her eyes. "I was wrong about you. So terribly wrong." "You were right about one thing," I admitted. "I didn't have balance. I would have worked myself to death without ever looking up." "And now?" she asked, a hint of hope in her voice. I glanced around the ballroom, at my team, my friends, the lives we were changing. "Now I know what matters." She reached for my hand. "Maybe we could talk sometime." "Start over?" 7 years ago, I would have given anything to hear those words. Now, they felt like echoes from another lifetime. "There's no starting over, Sarah." I gently withdrew my hand. "But I wish you well. Truly." As I walked away, I felt the last chains of resentment fall from my shoulders. The revenge fantasy I'd harbored for years, making her regret her choice, making her suffer as I had, seemed childish now. The greatest revenge wasn't showing her what she'd lost. It was becoming someone who no longer needed her to see it. Later that night, I approved her mother's grant application personally. Not out of pity or lingering affection, but because the project had merit. Because helping others had become my purpose, regardless of past wounds. The broken-hearted coder sleeping in his car could never have imagined the man I'd become. Not wealthy, though I was. Not successful, though I'd achieved beyond my wildest dreams. But whole, complete within myself. The betrayal that once defined me had become merely a chapter in a much larger story. Sometimes people enter our lives to break us open, forcing growth from pain. Sarah had been that catalyst. Not a villain, not a love story, but a necessary storm that cleared the path to who I was meant to be. As I stood on my penthouse balcony that night, watching the city lights shimmer below, I realized the greatest wealth wasn't in my bank accounts. It was in the freedom to live unburdened by what might have been, fully present in what is. That, I decided, was the most spectacular karma of all.